Okay, we're going to talk about the values and ratios of the trig functions using x, y, r today. Okay, so in grade 11, you learned this. The sine of the angle is the y over the r, which comes from opposite hypotenuse, right? Cosine of the angle was the x over the r, which also came from the ratio of a to h, adjacent hypotenuse. And tangent of the angle is the y over x, or the TOA, right? The TOA ratio. Okay, so on a unit circle, we could take a point, right, has the coordinates x, comma, y. And then we talk about the angle, right, the x is here, the y is here, and this is the r value, the radius of the circle, and this is where they all come from. So the sine ratio is opposite over hypotenuse, so it's the ratio of the y over the r. Okay, so that's where they all come from. Now, you're going to learn 3 new trig ratios, and here they are. Okay, so we're going to learn the word cosecant, secant, and cotangent. Okay, so cosecant looks like that. Secant of an angle would look like that. And cotangent of an angle would look like that. Okay, so those are the abbreviations for them. Now, this is kind of opposite in your thinking. Because this starts with a C, you suspect that it has something to do with cos, but it doesn't. This one is actually the opposite relationship of sine. Okay, and secant is the opposite relationship of cos. And this one actually makes sense. Cotangent is the opposite relationship of tangent. Okay, so these ones are tricky. These are the ones that always stump people, because if you look at the words, you might predict one thing, but it's not. It's the opposite relationship of the words. Okay, so if you want to think about this, cosecant is the opposite relationship of sine, so its ratio would be r over y then. And the secant of the angle, so if it's the opposite of cos, then it would be r over x. And if you took the cotangent of an angle, you would then take x over y, the opposite of tan. Okay, so let's do an example from grade 11. You're going to go through the point 5, negative 12. Okay, so let's go here. Here's my point 5, negative 12. Going through that point on a circle. There's my x, there's my y. Okay, so I need to know what the value of this r is. So I'm going to go the absolute value of 5 squared plus the absolute value of y squared, right? Because we can't actually have a distance of negative 12 when we're doing a distance. So 25 plus 144, we get 169. And when we take a square root of that value, we get r to be 13. Okay, so what if I asked you some trig values? What is the sine of the angle? Okay, so you would answer -12/13. What if I ask you for the secant of the angle? So now this is a new one from grade 11. We didn't do this one, so you just have to do the opposite of the cos ratio. So it would be 13/5. And the tan of the angle would be -12/5. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, just a side note, remember your Astica stuff. This is in the C quadrant, right? So anything pertaining to cos better be positive. So this is dealing with cos, right? So it still should be positive. Other ones should be negative. Okay, here's another example. If cosine of the angle is -3/5, and we know that the angle is in quadrant 2, find the cosecant of the angle. Okay, so what do we know? We know the x value. We know an r value, right? And we know it's in quadrant 2. Okay, so we know that's 5, and that's -3, and here is our y. So we're going to do Pythagorean theorem to get that y value. So 25, so r squared, subtract the x value squared, and we get 16. So then I know that this is 4. Now you also have to determine for yourself, is this a +4 or a -4? And the y value here would be a +4, okay? Obviously your Pythagorean theorem won't give you positive or negative, you'll have to determine that on your own. Okay, so now let's answer the question. So cosecant is the opposite of sine. So now we're going to be doing the r divided by the y. So your answer is 5/4. Okay, next one. If secant of the angle equals -25/7 and the angle is in quadrant 3, find the sine of the angle. Okay, so secant is the opposite of our cosine. So that's an x and an r, and it's in quadrant 3. Okay, so obviously your r is not going to be the negative, so it's going to be 25. So where did they get the negative fraction? That came from the x value there is -7. So now we're going to be getting our missing y value. Okay, so 25 squared is 625. Subtract 7 squared, and you get 576. And the square root of that is 24. Now again, is that a positive or negative? You have to decide. So the y values are negative in that quadrant. So now if we find the sine of the angle, we are going to get negative 24 over 25. Okay? Remember your Astica, we're in quadrant T, so you should have a negative fraction. Okay, I can do more, but I think I'm just going to stop there and let you work. But any point on a unit circle, just remember, has the coordinates. Okay, because on a unit circle, when we remembered our ratios, right, and on the unit circle, the r is 1. So we don't need to divide, so that's the xy coordinates, the cos, the sine value. So remember that. All right.